So everybody, Apple just released 2 new iPads, and by the tone of my voice, you guys probably know that I have some thoughts. So let's go over these iPads and talk about exactly what this means for the iPad lineup, because we got one really nice upgrade and then one which really, let's just say we have some thoughts, but let's get into it. Alright everybody, so let's start with the good that came up from this Take Note event or press release, whatever you guys want to call it. It was a silent release with these new iPad models. So with this new 10.9-inch 10th generation iPad, we get a few new things. So first off, we get a whole new redesign. I know we'll call it a redesign, but it literally just looks like the iPad Air. So it has a 10.9-inch LCD display on the front side. It has Touch ID in the power button on the top right hand corner, and then it also has that new industrial design language, right? So everything's more squared off, everything has uniform bezels around the edge, so the bezels are a little bit thicker than, let's say, the iPad Pro, but they will be the same size as the iPad Air. And in this new 10th generation iPad, Apple is actually able to put the Face ID and the FaceTime, the selfie camera, whatever they want to call it, they put it in the correct orientation. For those people that don't know what I'm talking about, they put the camera in the landscape orientation. So when you use this tablet as a laptop and you want to do a video conference, it's not going to be in that awkward position where you have to look to the bottom left every single time you want to look into the camera. So kudos to Apple for putting that on the iPad, but also it's weird because that is the one iPad that has the camera in the correct orientation. Every single iPad in the lineup has it in that portrait mode orientation, which I am not a fan of. And with this new iPad and the new redesign, it now also adopts the USB-C cable or USB-C port on the bottom of the iPad itself, which is all great and fine and dandy, which means now we have USB-C across the entire iPad lineup, sort of. And we'll talk about that in a second because we still are selling the 9th generation iPad, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it also includes 5G. So this is kind of an interesting situation. So in this new iPad, you have 5G capable iPad, you have USB-C, you have the new industrial design, you have an LCD 60 Hz display. Obviously it's not ProMotion because this is still kind of an entry-level iPad. And then also you have Touch ID on the power button, and it just looks like it fits the new iPad aesthetic, the new iPad uniform standard design language, which I'm all for. And it comes in some new colors which seem a lot more vibrant than the colorways that we get with the iPad Pro, with the iPad Air. For instance, when I got the purple iPad Air and the blue iPad Air, depending on when it hits the light, you would get those colors, but they would mostly just look space gray. But these colors look a lot more vibrant and punchy, and they look like they will be that yellow color, like they will be an actual pink color. And it also comes in a blue, which is a color we ordered, and it comes in the silver colorway. So there is no black or space gray colorway with this new 10th gen iPad. And you get all that with 64 gigs of base storage for about $449 US. Then it goes to $599 with the 256 gigabyte model. And then if you want to add 5G, that's another $200. But now the weird thing about this iPad, and I guess Apple had to take away or had to kind of get rid of features to bring it down in price, because for $449, it does fit kind of weirdly between the 9th gen iPad, which still sits at about $349. Then you have this one, and then you have the iPad mini and the iPad Air for $600 and the iPad Pro for $800. I guess they had to kind of get rid of some functionality to make this a more budget-friendly iPad, and the one thing that they decided to do, which was to not give it Apple Pencil 2 support, so it still uses the 1st gen Apple Pencil. And then you're probably asking me, okay, the 1st gen Apple Pencil has that weird charging situation where you have to take the top off and plug it in via Lightning, and this doesn't have a Lightning port. So what Apple, again, they thought of, I guess, is they bought a USB-C to Lightning adapter, which is kind of weird, which you just plug into the bottom of the USB-C cable, and then you plug the Apple Pencil into the female portion of the Lightning cable. So very, very strange charging situation. I thought the Apple Pencil 1 charging situation could not have gotten any worse, and lo and behold, Apple found a way to make it worse, and it's all in the name of kind of separating these tiers in some way, because if you don't do that and you give it Apple Pencil 2 support, the only real difference between the iPad Air and the iPad 10th generation is pretty much just the display, and the fact that it's not a laminate display, which is probably part of the reason why it doesn't support the Apple Pencil 2, and then also it doesn't have that anti-reflective coating. So basically, if you want to go from this 10th generation iPad, which starts at $449, the only difference that you would be paying $150 for if you will go with the iPad Air at that $600 price point is Apple Pencil 2 support and a little bit better screen tech, even though it's still 60 Hz across the board. It still has the same PPI in terms of pixel density. And I don't know, it's going to be a hard sell to get the iPad Air at this point. The only thing that the iPad Air has on top of it is obviously the M1 chip, which allows for Stage Manager and hopefully secondary monitor support, which we'll touch on a little bit with 16.1. But now again, the iPad 10th generation, that's where it's sitting at $449, which to me is a welcome upgrade. And then also alongside of that, which was one of the biggest question marks that I had with the redesign of this iPad, this entry-level iPad, was a new Magic Keyboard accessory. So this Magic Keyboard accessory is different from the $300 and $350 Magic Keyboard accessory. It looks a lot more like a Logitech Combo Touch, which honestly Logitech still sells and it's still a great product, but it looks kind of like that, or imagine Microsoft Surface. So it comes in two parts. You have the keyboard itself, which does connect via pin connectors on the iPad directly, and then also it has a back plate, which is pretty much just a cover for the back, and it adds as a stand, which gives you a lot of viewing angles. So if you want to go fully loaded with this thing, you spend $600 for the 256 gigabyte, you add 5G, you're at $800. You had a $250 keyboard, you're at $1,050. You had a $100 Apple Pencil 1, you are at $1,150 for an entry-level iPad, which is just a new one, which Apple did bring. So keep that in the back of your mind, which is kind of interesting to think about. We have a pretty much laptop-priced entry-level iPad now at this point, if you want to get it fully loaded and use it as a laptop. And then the last thing that I will mention about this iPad is that it is equipped with the A14 Bionic, which means that it will not be able to use Stage Manager because it does not have the A12X or the A12Z or the M1 chip that the iPad Air and the new iPad Pros have. So keep that in mind if you really want to use Stage Manager. This is not the way to do it. The cheapest entry point to use Stage Manager is at $600 iPad Air. And then when it comes to the rest of the hardware, they literally just took an iPad Air, the same exact cameras on the front and the back side, the same screen. Everything is exactly the same besides the laminated display, the ability to use Stage Manager, and the chipset inside. So hey, to each their own. Oh, and of course, the Apple Pencil 2 versus Apple Pencil 1 support. So that is the iPad 10th generation starting at $449. And now let's go into this new M2 iPad Pro. So if you guys watched my last video on the leaks and rumors of this M2 iPad Pro, you are aware that I use my iPad Pro a lot of the time for professional work, for video editing, thumbnail creation, Slacking, email, iMessage, gaming, you name it. Like, I love my iPad Pro, and I'm a big advocate that if you only have to pick one computer, like, the iPad Pro can be your computer if you want it to be, which is my use case. But like, all they really did is threw the M2 chip into this iPad. I mean, they did add some Wi-Fi 6E enablement. They added more 5G bands, which we knew was going to happen as well. But aside from that, it's all relatively the same thing. So you have the M2 chip, which does boost some performance, which they do say increases performance by 15% on the CPU side and up to 35% on the GPU side, and then also up to 40% with the neural engine side. But at the same time, I'm trying to think of a use case where I want my iPad to be faster, like my M1 iPad Pro. The only use case I can really think of is when I'm exporting a movie file or I'm exporting an edit, which I did for the YouTube channel. But even then, it kind of exports in real time. If I'm exporting a 10-minute video, it takes 10 minutes to export in 4K 30 with a bunch of different layers on that video edit. So I guess it could do it faster. It maybe will, and we'll do some testing when we do get the M2 iPad Pro because we did get one. But again, that is what you're getting with the M2 iPad Pro. And then everything else stays exactly the same. So the 11-inch one still does not get mini LED. It still has a liquid retina. Mini LED is on the new M2 iPad Pro, which we had already on this one. Both of them still have Pro Motion. And then the only other feature which Apple kind of mentioned was this new Apple Pencil Hover feature, which I don't even know what they're going to do with it. It's kind of like, imagine a worse version of what the S Pen is good at on the Galaxy Note series and the Galaxy Tab series, at least from what I'm seeing. The screen in the iPad basically recognizes your Apple Pencil 2, I think like 12 millimeters out of the actual iPad, which I don't know what the use case is really going to be. It's supposed to help with like precision when illustrating and things like Procreate and maybe in LumaFusion and Affinity Photo, which are apps that I use, but I don't really know what the real use case in the real world kind of enhancement is going to be by having that the extra 12 millimeters of, I guess, connectivity is the word I would use, even though it's not actually touching the screen itself. Like, you're not going to be able to write without touching the screen. It's just going to have some sort of UI enhancement when it is over and when it is hovering over the screen. So again, you have the M2 chip, faster Wi-Fi, faster 5G bands, and then this Apple Pencil 2 hover situation. Outside of that, you are dealing with the same exact iPad, right? The same camera system, the same screen, the same chassis, the same battery, the same price, the same storage space availability. Everything is exactly the same as it was last year. And so again, Apple, in my opinion, kind of let me down. I know we still have iPadOS 16.1, which will release October 24th to the entire public, and that was announced by Apple, at least passively. We're still not going to get that secondary monitor support quite yet, but we will be getting Stage Manager on all the 16.1 iPads, at least all the iPad Pros from 2018 and higher, and any M1. And then these iPads will be shipped on Wednesday, October 26th. So keep that in mind if you are looking to get one. So again, if you're an M1 iPad Pro user right now, zero need to go to the M2 iPad Pro. It's kind of the same situation between the 13 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max. They're just incremental spec updates and spec bumps. I guess Apple's waiting because they gave all the cool stuff, and by cool stuff I mean just moving the selfie camera to the proper orientation. Like, they should have done that with the iPad Pro, but maybe they're waiting until next year to really kind of up everything, because they didn't even improve the speed on the Thunderbolt port. Like, nothing else was changed. So I mean, I wouldn't even say, unless you are using it as your main computer, like if you have a 2018 iPad Pro and you think it's slowing down, then maybe upgrade to this one. But outside of that, like, you gotta be all the way down at like the original 2015, 2016 iPad Pro to want to upgrade to the M2 iPad Pro. So the last thing I will mention about that is that it still has that same divvy when it comes to RAM on the M2 iPad Pro. So from 512 down, you get 8 gigs of RAM, and then from 1 terabyte and 2 terabytes, you get 16 gigs of RAM. And I thought we were gonna get a 24 gig RAM version with this M2 chip, because the M2 chip does support up to 24 gigs of RAM like we saw on the M2 MacBook Air, but these iPads are staying at 16 gigs, they're staying capped at that, which again, let's see what Apple does. Maybe they're saving up for an iPad Ultra, which is gonna be a 14.1 inch, you know, M2 Max, M2 Pro chip with 24, 32 gigs of RAM with proper orientation of the selfie camera, but it's gonna cost like $3,000 with an Apple Pencil 3. But a guy can dream, everybody. But that's gonna do it. Leave some comments down below. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this release. I personally think the entry-level iPad will be the one to get for a lot of people, because it's that perfect kind of situation where it fits the new design, the new aesthetic. It doesn't feel old anymore like the entry-level iPad. But the things are going to get expensive when it comes to accessories, right? $250 for an accessory to something that's only $450. That's more than half the price just for a keyboard and a trackpad. But I'm sure there'll be a lot more third-party accessories that will work plenty well with this one. And we're also going to test out if iPad Air cases and accessories will work with this iPad 10th generation. I'm going to be curious to know. But if you did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And you know, sound off in the comments down below. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Is any of this worth it? Where are you coming from? How do you use your iPad? Are you somebody that just throws it around and uses it as a content consumption machine? Or are you more like me, where you try to use it in a professional manner, you try to use it for revenue generating tasks and things like that? But if you guys want to watch some more iOS, macOS, or iPadOS content, definitely stay subscribed and click on one of these videos, because we will be doing a complete walkthrough on every single feature that 16.1 brings to each and every single iPad early next week. But until next time, I'm Fernando. I'm out of here. Peace. I really got to do something about these iPad guys. It's making me sad.